everyone, and welcome to the Peacemaker Aftershow. We just got Peacemaker episodes 1, 2, and 3 on HBO Max. I'm so excited to dive into this and talk with you guys. I have an amazing panel here to chat all things Peacemaker. We're very, very excited, but my name is Tessa Smith. You guys can find me everywhere at Mama's Geeky online, mamasgeeky.com, Mama's Geeky on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, here, everywhere. John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. You can always find me at The Roca Says. Hey, everyone. I'm John Roca. I'm a writer, producer, and host on my own outlet, The Outlaw Nation. I co-host a podcast called The Geek Buddies, where we break down all kinds of superhero nerdy stuff every week, going on for 2 years now. Can't wait to dive into this. Been waiting for Peacemaker, and as a massive fan of pro wrestling, I love John Cena, so I'm excited to see these two things that I love come together in one for a series. So excited.
So exciting. I can't wait to just spew my love for this show. James, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Sure. Hi, folks. James White here. You can find me at JamWhite on Twitter. I'm also on EmpireOnline.com, and I usually write a load of stuff on Substack at JWrites. Just every Friday I do reviews and the occasional other column. And yeah, and I'm really thrilled to be talking about Peacemaker 2 because I really enjoyed the show so far.
It's so good. All right, Heather, why don't you let everyone know where to find you?
Hey, everybody. I'm the managing editor over at dailydead.com. I also contribute over at Fangoria. You can find me on Twitter over at The Horror Chick, and also shameless plug because I'm a wrestling fan, so we know how to plug our stuff. I recently just put out a book called Monsters, Makeup and Effects, Volume 1, which is available now. And like John, I am also a huge wrestling fan, and I'll get into that more. But I was really excited to see John Cena kind of do something that I've never seen before, and that I think also includes having rough sex with a random lady. So here we go.
I know. I tell you, this show, I just was like, right from the beginning, you're like, oh, this is what this show is going to be. Okay. All right. We're just going for it. It's like, I've said this many times, but it's like full James Gunn. It's like, they just were like, here, James, do what you want to do. Have fun with it. I should preface everything I say by saying I am like a massive James Gunn fan. His style is just so my style. Clearly, I have a Guardians of the Galaxy sleeve, complete with his autograph tattooed on my body. Wow. So I'm a James Gunn fan. I love everything he does. I think he's so good, especially with Ensemble cast. So I was a big fan of the Suicide Squad. And I love how I feel like they really continued that vibe of the Suicide Squad that we got. I mean, I'm here for doing this for every single character from the Suicide Squad. I'm definitely all about that. But what I liked, did you guys notice the first, was it maybe 3-4 minutes? They catch you up on the Suicide Squad. So if it's been a while, they let you know what happened, which I thought was great.
Yeah. As somebody who used to be into episodic TV in the 80s and the 90s and stuff, it felt just kind of like that, where it was previously on, Melrose Place or previously on X-Files. And, so at least for some reason, if you haven't seen Suicide Squad, you can still dive into this pretty easily, with sort of that little refresher there. But I thought it was fun. I really enjoyed. I wasn't sure how, if James was going to dial the tone back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, do you sort of throw this at people for 40-something odd minute episodes? But he just comes out guns blazing, if you will, with a double N. And I haven't slept a lot this week, so there might be a lot of this. I apologize. But I was like 3 minutes in, and I was already laughing hysterically to myself, and my dogs were staring at me, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, it's so great.
As a kid of the 80s, I mean, hair metal, over muscly dudes, sarcastic comments, inappropriate comment. This is what we had mostly through the 80s. So I know a lot of people were worried that, these superhero things were going to be a little bit softer, going to be a little bit nicer. I like that James figured out how to do something that could make fun of itself, but also take itself seriously. It's a high wire of an act that he's pulling off here in this show that I think is brilliant, because by every right you should hate Peacemaker, and it's honest to how Peacemaker is in the comics and has been historically through the comics, But the fact that he's got a sweeter heart and people are trying to make him aware of the stuff, but he's still not fully like learning the lesson over and over again. I think it's an incredible high wire act that he's pulling off so well throughout the show. And John Cena is doing incredible work. I heard from a lot of people on Twitter and whatever, like they were worried. I don't know. Can he carry a whole show? Yeah, he's fun in snippets or in parts, but can he carry a whole show? And he's certainly showing us, and especially after that scene in episode 2, that man can actually bring some depth to this character and really make you feel for him and care for him. And him and Robert Patrick at the dinner table, woof. I mean, if you've had any bad relations with your dad or your mom, you know that scene very, very well. And so just so much of this is like exposing it. It's almost like The Wrestler for superheroes, and I love that.
Yeah, it's so great when he's like, "Don't tell me that's the guy that shot you." You're like, "Oh, oh no, the poor
I'm
guy."
not supposed to talk about those things. Yeah,
I know. James, what do you think overall, just of these 3 episodes so far?
I was really, really impressed. I mean, I really like the Suicide Squad. I did wonder how John was going to be carrying. So he's done some impressive stuff, recently. He's really shown himself to be a man of sort of depth and doing stuff. But I did wonder about carrying the whole show, and he is fantastic. He throws himself into this stuff. I mean, there's literally like 2 minutes into the first episode, after you get the Suicide Squad recap, he stood there in a hospital gown with his butt showing, and you're just like, The Rock does a lot of fun stuff and makes fun of himself, but I don't know how much exactly he would do that. And he's just there, and he's doing it. He's vulnerable, and he's funny, and you kind of hate Peacemaker in his own way, but you kind of understand where he's coming from with his dad and his upbringing and everything else he did, and so he's fantastic. The show is fantastic. I think it manages to do really good fun stuff, even in the first 3 episodes with all of the characters. They're not just. I don't feel like the rest of the characters are just there to support Peacemaker. They're all really good. They're all really good, and I am officially, and I will be talking about this a lot on the show, I warn you now, obsessed with Eagley. Eagley for life.
Yes!
I love that. He's so great. He is such a perfect combination of James Gunn's kind of ability to have non-verbal characters that really work well, or animated characters that work really well. The VFX team have done an outstanding job with him. He's like a dog. He's like a cat. He hugs. I mean, come on, who doesn't love that?
I want a hug from an eagle. I mean, I can't be the only one, right?
Yeah.
I'd be happy for an Eagley hug. Absolutely. I want an Eagley doll.
I'm waiting for the installation at Comic-Con next year where you can just walk up and get hugged by an eagle. That's got to happen. That's got to happen.
That might be the thing that brings me back to Comic-Con. I'll be really honest. And I'm like, well, we haven't had it for a few years. Do we need it? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, hug from Eagley, that could be it.
That could be it. I personally, one of my favorite things was anybody who's been around my stuff for a while knows I don't love Aquaman. I don't know why. I just don't like Aquaman. So like that conversation that he starts off, he's just, all the Aquaman hate. I was like, I feel seen. Like I'm here for this. But the thing I liked about it too is it's clearly Peacemaker being like, oh, I read this on the internet and it's true. Which is like,
and then he gives off somebody's like random Twitter name, which I pray to God that's a real Twitter handle. I meant to write it down and it went too fast, but I swear I wouldn't put it past James to literally have started an account that says all this stuff about Aquaman. But then you'd have a lot of Warner Brother like DC fans out there, and it could get a little messy. So
that's true.
And that's the gutsy thing about this show, right? I mean, they're so matter of fact about the characters in the world of DC. Like he just drops names randomly, throughout Batmite, those guys, he's just randomly throwing out certain characters. You're like, what? Wait, what? And so they're not like Marvel. It's a big Easter egg. It's coming. He's just like randomly dropping characters like it's no big deal. And he's making fun of their like number one characters in a way that we haven't seen before. Deadpool does that, but that was in the was it a Fox Marvel universe? Now in the MCU, I wonder if he's going to be just as sarcastic in his approach at going after the paragons of virtue that are the Marvel characters. The fact that he's able to talk about Aquaman's obsession with a fish, and then later in some other episodes, he's got something to say about Superman that's really unsettling as well. His toe-to-toe about Batman. I mean, all this stuff you hear coming out of his mouth, I love that they're approaching it this way, as if this world exists. It's not a big deal to mention these kind of smaller characters that Peacemaker has fought in the comics, and like it's no big deal. And I appreciate that, because that, for those of us who are comic book fans, we get to go, yes. And for those who aren't, y'all on Google going, who's that? Who's that? And so it just adds more of an interactive approach to the show that I think is genius.
I love it. It's so good.
I mean, admittedly, honestly, I grew up a DC kid, but I really haven't read DC comics since the late 90s, because then I kind of moved on to other stuff like Sandman and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of the Vertigo stuff specific. So a lot of these I was writing names as quickly as I could, because I do the thing is, because I never grew up really a Marvel person, but I watch all the Marvel stuff too. So a lot of that stuff, I go and I start doing looking into these different things, because to be honest, I haven't seen the Eternals yet. I know it's on Disney Plus. That's going to be on the horizon in the next few days. But I know nothing about this world really, other than a few snippets that I've read here and there. But honestly, that's what I love about this specifically, is even if you're not super geeky about all those little names and everything like that, it's not like you're missing the point,
right,
or the joke of it either, because James sets it up in such a way that it's really accessible for everybody.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, John, you mentioned Deadpool, which I'm nervous about, because I love Deadpool, but apparently on the internet, girls don't love Deadpool.
I love Deadpool too. So
if you do, you're totally faking it. I mean, we're faking it anyway. We fake comics.
Oh, you're talking about you all are being accused as women of faking your love of Deadpool? Is that the nonsense?
Yeah, that's one of the things I've heard many times when I've talked about Deadpool ad nauseum. But what I think is interesting is, I think if Peacemaker works as well as I think it's going to work, and if it's successful enough, I think Marvel might unclench those, tight butt cheeks a little bit and be like, all right, let's let have some fun, because there is fun to be had. And I think that's the one thing that kind of makes me bummed out when I see stuff like Suicide Squad and this, and James shows you it's okay to laugh a little, because I think comic fans just take things a little too seriously. But I mean, we all take things seriously, but I think it's okay to like still have fun with it and not feel like you're betraying your passion for it. So I kind of hope this is sort of this new wave where it's like, yeah, it's okay to have a little bit more fun with it.
Well, that's the thing. The humor throughout this is just, it gets like better and better. And it's so funny, but you can go from something that's like absolutely hilarious, you're cracking up, and then there's like this brutal, insane fight. Like there's things crawling out of people's heads and you're like, what is happening? And you're like laughing because of that. It's just, James Gunn is so good, I think, at mixing those things together. Like we saw in the Suicide Squad, where you can go from humor to just brutal, bloody massacres to humor. It's like, plus the music, add on the music, the soundtrack. The guy knows what he's doing when it comes to music, just to heighten every single scene. I mean, some of my favorite stuff in this was like the brutality of it. And I was worried again, was he going to dial that back? Because this is like a show, and it doesn't seem like he is, which I'm excited for. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely been able to go for it. I mean, heck, in the end of the first episode, you have someone literally exploding into goo. I mean, if that's not a sign of, okay, folks, this is what you're going to be in for, get ready, then I don't know what is. It's just perfect. And I love how he's able to layer in everything. Like you said, like Tessa, you said about the humor and the violence and everything else. And he can even do the exposition really, really cleverly, because you have even that conversation between him and his dad kind of gets you up to speed again on what happened with Bloodsport and everything else. And it kind of gives you some extra layers to why he is how he is, and all of that stuff is just coming and coming and coming. And it's really well done. It's really well laid out. It never distracts from the story. You don't sit there and feel like, oh, okay, now we're stopping and you're telling me something. There's even a running joke that Clemson Munn won't tell him what the butterflies are to begin with. He's still like, what are these things? And you're probably asking that as an audience member. You're like, okay, tell me what it is. And it's not letting you. And I love that thing. It feels very knowing and very clever. And the style of it and the mixture of all these different tones, it's just perfect. You go from him, absolutely just being an out and out idiot at the restaurant, not knowing that Sweet Cheeks is, and then everybody know that sweet cheese is an embarrassing term forever, but apparently people have used it forever. And then you go from there to an episode where he's crying in his trailer because he hates himself, and it's just amazing. And again, credit to John Cena, credit to James Gunn, credit to everybody. It's just really, really well done.
Yeah, he as I said, the interactive nature of it all as you're viewing it is you have to experience the world through his eyes. Piece by piece, episode by episode, they're going to give you more and more of his backstory, and that's going to flesh him out so much more. And you can go back and rewatch these episodes now after you've watched all the other episodes, once this finishes, with a whole different perspective, and watch these scenes with even more of an emotional impact on you for sure. And I think that's so brilliant. Plus, if you're going to do something to kind of counter Marvel's approach, you got to stand out. And this is a way to stand out. I mean, it's such a gutsy approach to doing this. It's very memorable. And I would say this is the best thing he's done, James Gunn has done since the first Guardians of the Galaxy, in my opinion. This is so completely and purely his vision, his approach, his style, and no punches are being pulled here in any way. And I wonder how the audience is going to react as we get more time with his dad as well, who's kind of a very, very troubling character. How much, which is based on the comics, how much more of that are they going to dial into, and how our audience is going to react? But overall, just seeing his approach to this character, and now he's bringing out his pain and his sadness and his self-hatred. And especially nowadays when we're also into mental health and talking about mental health and breaking these stigmas, to have a character like this that is so immensely unlikable at times, but also understanding the pain that is the source of his unlikability is such a great challenge for the audience.
Yeah, I would say you talked about the scene where he's like crying on the bed, and it was like that took me back to, I'm a little bit older, so I remember, and John probably knows too, because I think we're pretty similar age. I think we had this conversation.
I'm 25. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, I'm 23, so it works out great.
So same age.
Yeah, I'm starting to grade really early. But like him laying on the bed doing it, like I don't know if you guys remember, there was like these infomercials, and then eventually the releases went commercial. But it was Monster Jams and Monster Ballads, which I had both. And like him laying on the bed, I like literally took me back to like popping in Monster Ballads like one night in like my apartment when I was like 19. It just having myself a really good cry, and I was like, I get you right now, Peacemaker. We are one. But I want to talk about the evolution of John Cena, and because I think his physicality fits the action well. Like I like that the style that they're going here really fits who he is physically as a person, because sometimes like you'll watch things and like lanky people are trying to do really strong, very like broad, like muscly type thing. Like there's a way of movement that really complements like his physical stature, if that makes sense. And I think especially that apartment fight really does it extremely well. Like that, I mean, it was just bananas. But we were talking about like, wrestlers and, John mentioned being a big fan. Like I was, I'm originally from Chicago. So I was actually in the Allstate Arena on June 27th, 2002. And Kurt Angle was standing in the ring, and this kid comes out who had just come up from I forget what their OVW or something like that.
Yeah.
He was known as the prototype. He was just like this blank canvas. And he just said like two words, like Kurt Angle's like, why do you think you can hang with me? And he said ruthless aggression, which then ultimately sort of kicked off this new era in WWE at that time. And I never would have imagined that guy who eventually, and the thing is, I've always known he's funny, because if you watch rapper John Cena days, like he's hilarious. Like people were booing him a lot of times, but I think they were booing it with love, because you go back and you watch those segments now and they absolutely kill. And so the comedy, like the sly, like dry comedy aspects of the performance isn't what surprises me. It's the quieter moments in between that I'm just like, damn, he's really doing it. And, I'm not starting a Dwayne versus John Cena fight here.
How dare you?
No. Dwayne is my heart and soul. And, one day I'm going to track down the guy who pushed me out of the way at the Rampage junket to get a picture with him. And then he got taken away and I didn't get one. And I'm still sad about it to this day. Oh my goodness.
Your dog's upset about it too.
Yeah. But I will say they do things very differently. And I think John has been really smart in his career with the roles that he's taken, where they're very deliberate. And I loved him in Suicide Squad because you come out of it thinking all these things about him, but there's still something empathetic to it because ultimately he's just doing a job. It's not the right job, but it's a job, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. And in these first 3 episodes, like, I can't believe how much I really like and care about this character that, 6 months ago when I'm watching Suicide Squad, I wanted to punch in the face. And I think that's a huge credit to him that he's able to sort of go back and forth with these little subtle character touches. I don't know much about his character in the comics, but the work that John is doing live in screen is pretty phenomenal so far.
Well, think about like when, and he does it in such a horrible way, like when he's presented in episode 3 with who he's supposed to kill here. And he's like, I'm supposed to kill these kids. I mean, this one's a little homely, but you're like, okay, that shouldn't be the reason. But like, you can tell he's kind of like, wait, I'm supposed to kill kids. And it's just such a, like you say, a subtle, like, that's what he means. But then, of course, he just fills it with, like, how ugly this poor kid is. But he's just so great. And then, of course, this is going to develop more and more as the season goes on, which I'm really looking forward to everyone else, all of you guys out there seeing, because it's so good. But let's talk about all of the new characters that they've brought in, because we've gotten a lot of the people continuing over from the Suicide Squad, but we've got a lot of new characters, including Vigilante here, which I just found out. I didn't even know about this. I just found out James Gunn had tweeted that they replaced the actor after 5.5 episodes. They'd already filmed 5.5. They had to go back and reshoot all his scenes.
Wow.
And you would never know. It's so seamless.
Wow.
But can you believe 5.5 episodes?
That's what helps. It helps when you keep him in the mask. You just have to redo the voice. You only saw him, so that helps overall.
But so what did you guys think of Vigilante?
I think he's the greatest thing. I mean, I love that guy. We've all known a guy, maybe some of us have been that guy, where you become like the person who's like sees the cool kid and wants to be the big friend of the cool kid. And in his mind, in that trailer park world, Peacemaker represents the cool kid, right? And so he wants to be a part of that world, and he is so just unabashedly desirous of his friendship, and he's ruthless. And he's like, we find out later, what's the connection here, but like he is so ruthless in what he's going after and how he's doing things. And even in that moment, I mean, he really has care in the 3rd episode when he taps him on the shoulder, right? And he says, step aside, man, I'll take. And you're just like, oh, wow. So he's even to that level where he's going to try to remove the pain, or he doesn't want his friend to be embarrassed. He's going to go save his friend in an emotional moment. I thought that was genius. So such a great addition to this whole Peacemaker world that I think works so well.
Yeah, I love them together. What do you guys think, Heather, James?
James, you can go. I just jibber jabbered a bunch.
Yeah, I really like Vigilante. I know he's now. I'm not a huge DC fan. I mean, I like DC, but I'm not like a huge knowledge base for DC. I probably know more about Marvel stuff, but I know he's a character from the comics, if I'm not mistaken. But I think what they've done is they've done a completely fresh sort of take on it, if I'm not mistaken. He's just like, this is James Gunn's take on it. He's made him this nerdy guy who's really wants to, just be Peacemaker's best pal, and he's also a ruthless assassin. He's this incredibly sweet-natured, in some ways, kind of nerdy, wimpy guy. When you see him, it's like a complete alter ego, and then you see him show up, and he's not completely like lethal when he's in the suit. He's still kind of gawky and weird, and sort of comes back, acts like the smart kid in school that wants to like react to the bullies and everything, and then you see him just turn on that kind of real lethality. He likes killing people, and then there's other stuff that happens to him is just really bad. It's really bad things happen to Vigilante at one point in that 3rd episode. But then you've got all of those kind of layers, and then you've got all these other people around those characters. I mean, how the cops like Sophie Song and Larry Fitzgibbon. I love those 2 cop characters. I feel like I could see a cop show with those ripping and doing their thing and dealing with, as they keep referring to. I know in these first couple of episodes they keep referring to like cape stuff. They know that they've already got vigilantes kind of like hanging around killing people, and they've got all that kind of stuff to deal with. And then they're just so like Detective Song in particular is so world weary at this point. She's just like, oh, here we go again. And then they have to confront Augie, Peacemaker's dad, so wonderfully played by Robert Patrick. And
Oh yeah.
please tell me they showed up to his door. He opened the door and they both went, "Have you seen this boy?" But probably not. Because,
that should be like an outtake if they ever release this. Like,
I would just love to have seen someone have the balls to just do that. Just go to Robert Patrick and just, "Have you seen this boy?" And just see what he does.
Yeah, if they didn't, and James is watching this right now, he's like, "Son of a bitch, we missed a opportunity." Everybody go back. We gotta shoot this.
Right, let's just reshoot it, and then we'll have it, and then we'll release it.
Yeah, I think what's great about Vigilante is he's sort of like the softer side of Peacemaker. He's the parts of Peacemaker. Well, here's the thing. He's a trained assassin, but he's a guy who wants to belong, right? And you ultimately get the sense from Peacemaker, as he's coming out of this, and he doesn't have to go back to prison, so he loses his social structure there. Like, he's a guy who's just trying to figure out where he fits. Yeah. Like, he wants that sort of validation and that companionship from his dad, but does he really? Because then he realizes, like, oh no, this was a bad idea. Although, do we try the scabies helmet? I'm not sure. I love that there's little post-credit scenes too. That's a really fun touch.
They're so good.
So it's like, for me, like, he's the bad, like he mirrors the bad parts, but I think he also brings out the good parts of Peacemaker. And I've only seen the first 3, so I don't know how necessarily right on that's going to be once we get to like episodes 7 and 8. But I think it's a really fun performance because you have Peacemaker who's sort of playing everything straight. His, compatriots in the field are somewhat similar, except for Steve Agee, who is always hilarious and always brings a smile to my face, and I just adore him. So, having this sort of silly guy in spandex come walking around, and he's like, "Hey guys, what's going on? I'm just hiding behind a dumpster." Like, I love him. Like, next to Eagley, he is the best thing ever.
Oh, and that interaction between them, Heather, when he's like, you have your cock out? Do you have your cock out? I mean, I want to know if you everything, that whole back and forth, and then the Louis C.K. reference out of nowhere. I was like, what is happening? What is happening? And I'm just like, this is so brilliant. And he has to convince him to look at his crotch. I mean, that is just genius. Dudes have dumb conversations like that. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, dudes have dumb conversations like that.
Well, thank God, Raiden, we only have really good, smart, and thoughtful conversations. Although the shots on the iPad was
oh my
god!
I was like, wait, what the hell was? I was like, oh, okay, oh.
I know, I was like there.
Yeah. But what I love about that moment is, one, it's gross. It's a filthy, naughty little thing, but also, like, James sort of humanizes that's just how people in relationships, like, they handle things like that these days. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, being on the phone, having like a sexual phone conversation or anything like that. Like, that's just how couples communicate these days. And I think he's like normalizing it in a way, which is kind of amazing. Yeah. It ends up being like a really like whoa moment, but also kind of like, oh, okay, that's kind of sweet.
Yeah. When she like goes on to explain it, she's like, well, she moved out, so we're trying to experiment with things. And she like throws Harcourt under the bus. She's like, she made her leave. I don't know. And then they're like, that just happens with WhatsApp. I didn't know that. Like, that whole scene is so funny. Oh, yeah. Like, I just was completely shocked though when they did. I was like, oh. Then I was like, oh yeah, this is James Gunn. This fits. This makes sense that he's doing this. But you're right, Heather. It normalizes it, which I love.
Yeah, I really love her too in this, because I feel like if I was ever like put in this like super cool, super spy scenario, that would be me. I'd be the person who talks too much, who tries to get to know everybody's feelings about things and hesitates in shooting anybody. And there's just a lot of humanity that's about with like her like funny little dog she brings with, she's like her AM teacher, because that would be my first thought. Would be like, oh my God, who's coming for my dogs and my and my significant other. Pardon me. And I just think she brings a lot of she grounds it for me. Like, she kind of becomes the heart, in these first 3 episodes. And I just adore her. Like, I think it's interesting, her connection in this, because I was sort of half expecting it, but when it happens, I was like, oh, okay. And now it makes you kind of wonder, like, is this going to be a lot of folks towards the end realizing that they're basically being used for things that they didn't really realize they were being used, and where does that go from here? You know, I mean, I think that's that's the theme of the Suicide Squad in general. So
Yeah.
It is. I adore her. I think she's so fun. Just right from the beginning when she just starts talking, and then she's talking, and then she's talking. She's like, and I don't know why I'm still talking. And like she brings so much fun to every single episode, and like especially later on, she has some really, really great moments that I want to talk about, but I can't. But Harcourt too. I really enjoyed seeing more of Jennifer Holland in this. She's so good. It makes me almost think she's like, I'm like, man, she's kind of underused in the Suicide Squad that we're getting this from her now, if that makes sense. Yeah. I just think she's so much fun. Just from the moment when she's just sitting at the bar and she's like, you were being super stalkery. And then the guys come over, and then when she says, what was that word? What were you going to say? I was like, yes, like, girl, I feel you. She's like, I just want to have a beer, and all you people are trying to talk to me. I adore her in this. What do you guys think of Harcourt here?
Well, first of all, James Gunn is the luckiest SOB on the planet. She is absolutely gorgeous and incredibly talented. And, you know, she's an actress that you can see worked her way, like small parts here, small parts here, small parts, then eventually a little bit more, a series regular in the Sun Record show, and then boom, finally, someplace where she can showcase what she can do, and she is relishing the opportunity. And you can tell as an actress, she is having such a great time, playing so many different colors, playing so many different levels throughout the first 3 episodes that we're talking about. I mean, you know, Peacemaker's making it very clear his intentions with her, and she's like, you know, pushing him back, but also making him aware, like, dude, I'm just trying to have a beer. Why do I have to entertain you and these jerk-offs? I just want to have a beer, you know. And so trying to teach him in some to the messed up guy, trying to teach him how to kind of interact with her in a more respectful way. And I love all that. But then you see her interactions with Leota at first are very, you know, kind of standoffish. Don't take that desk. You get the other one, blah, blah, blah. But then step by step, piece by piece, she's making a little bit more of a connection with her. And so all of that, she's essentially co-team leader. And you can sense that as this goes along. Myrn, of course, that actor doing great work as well. But it's very much Jennifer Holland being the co-team leader here. And she's doing great. I love it.
I just caught something that I don't know if this is right or not, because I've only saw it like the one time. But what was the name of the gal that he hooks up with in the apartment? Is it Espenscheid?
Oof.
I've even seen it several times, and I couldn't tell you.
Okay, the only reason I ask is because that was Jennifer Holland's character's last name in Brightburn, which I thought was interesting. And I was like, wait, hold up, are we doing this? Because I was looking at, because I knew I'd seen her like in a bunch of things, and I remember really, you know, liking her in that. I was like, wait, I think that's the same name as the last name of the gal in the apartment. So now I'm gonna have to go back and watch it for that. But if I wouldn't put it past James, because he doesn't like he'll carry names over, like, but he's carried names over from like Slither and stuff too, and things like that. So, but yeah, I just caught that, so I just wanted to mention that with Jennifer Holland. Maybe I'm, you know, doing a little too hard of internet sleuthing there.
I think what do you think about her, James?
Yeah, I think she's fantastic. I think she's just taking the script and running with it, and all the layers that Harcourt has. She's not just the badass. She's got they have that little moment when they're on the assassination sort of stakeout, and she talks about how she got, when I think it's like Peacemaker has a line where he says, "Oh, that's a lot of gun for a little girl." She goes, "I was a lot of little girl for that gun," and that kind of stuff. Just talk about how she grew up, and their sort of her father-daughter dynamic, and his, like, as opposed to his father-son dynamic, and everything like that. It just really, really works to build that character out, to make her she could just be a badass, which is fine, which is great, but she's everything. She comes across as a real human being, and she's just frustrated by stuff. She doesn't want this assignment. She knows she's basically being punished by Amanda Waller, she and Economist, both after what happened in Suicide Squad, but she's a soldier. She's a good soldier. She'll go along with it, get it done, but that won't stop her being absolutely sarcastic, you know, absolutely biting when she needs to be. But then when you sense a little bit of a connection between her and you know, Chris Smith, Mr. Peacemaker himself, just as like a potential for a friendship opening up there, it's just great. And Jennifer Holland, she just absolutely does everything she needs to do. Every little look is great. Like when he's suddenly in the second episode when he needs to escape from the apartment and he's sort of calling her and helping her and she's trying to get dressed and everything and she's just walking past like a corridor and there's some dude who kind of like scopes her out because she's got half her shirt and everything and she's like, what? It's just like it's perfect. It's like every little perfect detail is really well done and I really appreciate that about her. Yeah, she's really, really good.
She's so good.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but I just realized because I was trying to figure out like where I've seen her like way back because when I first started, I watched like every horror movie that was coming out, and I totally forgot she was in Zombie Strippers, which is the first time I ever saw her because I actually had to do an interview, I believe, with Robert Englund for that movie.
Wow.
And I was like, God, like why? Like I remembered her from Brightburn and I obviously know she was in Suicide Squad, and I hadn't seen the show that you mentioned, John. So I was like,
Oh yeah.
I'm like, but I know her from something. And that was like one of the first movies like I ever actually covered. And it's actually kind of fun. So, if anybody out there is looking for something weird, Zombie Strippers could be your jam. Who knows? Who knows? We all start somewhere.
But it's a great chemistry, right? Like from the beginning, this team is brought together and the chemistry with all the actors, Tessa, I mean, I'm so in love with this team, so in love with every one of the characters. I'm invested in their journey, I'm invested in the story. And by the way, they're doing this with 36 to 48 minutes, 42 minutes episodes. They're making you care about these characters and their separate journeys and their journeys together as they take on what they're taking on and become a team. Just so invested with what they're creating here, and I'm so excited about it because I think as great as John Cena is, you got to have everyone else around him doing their stuff as well, and it helps to create a fantastic ensemble piece here that is called Peacemaker, but they're all just as essential.
Well, that's the thing James Gunn can do is what I was going to say. He's so good with ensemble casts.
Well, I was going to say that too, because it's just demonstrated in that opening sequence, which is amazing.
Oh my God.
I've been trying so hard.
I can't do the dance. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. But it's so brilliant because it's like one of these things where it fits perfectly, but also just reminds me of like watching like Big Lebowski and like how weird, like you're not expecting this like weird dance sequence, but it works. And also everybody gets their little moment in there. And I think that's James knowing that, when you have an ensemble, and they're talented like this, you show everybody off.
Even the nosy neighbor guy, he does a little thing.
Moments.
Homie with the mop rolling through there is great.
Right?
That low-key, my favorite scene in the first episode is right off the bat, as you mentioned, James, earlier, him standing there with his butt to the world and him talking with his friend. He's like, I'm not going to get you weed again, man. We're not best friends. Don't trust me. I was at MIT, man. Don't trust me. And he's trying to connect. And that's how sad and desperate he is that he's trying to connect to a guy who just met just because the guy got him weed, and it's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing of kind of these sad interactions we're going to see with Peacemaker because he's essentially a lonely guy. And so just like so much of that, even though it's played for laughs, is so great in that scene.
It's so good. And like I was going to say, when we were talking about all the different characters having their moments too, like Economist, I was so happy for him when he like beat up Judo Master when he and he's like dancing. He's so proud of himself. I'm like, I'm so proud of you. Like I'm cheering for him as I'm watching. Oof. Like just little moments like that. And like, let's talk about Judo Master for a minute. How funny. I'm watching this going, I need some Flaming Hot Cheetos. Like I haven't had them in forever.
I think there's actually a shortage on Flaming Hot Cheetos these days too, which makes it even more frustrating. There is? I believe there is a Flaming Hot Cheeto shortage, or at least there was like a few months ago, because everything comes in waves. I still like have to track down like Diet Dr. Pepper. Like it's like going to Mordor or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's been like almost 2 years and it's impossible to find Diet Dr. Pepper. So
wow.
But yeah, Flaming Hot Cheetos. I have a bag and I was like, ooh, I should have some, but computer, fingers, it's all that. Yeah. But yeah, he's amazing. And like, I just love, because again, it's one of these things, like it calls back to sort of wrestling roots where it's like, you have these big guys who always dismissed these smaller statured athletes and not realizing how well they could just kick some ass. And he's like, that sequence is like bing, bang, boom. And it's like the camera work is phenomenal. It was a total blast for me.
Yeah. I've never seen it. I mean, it's such an unusual character, and it works so well in the scope of things. And I think Heather's right. This idea is almost like a little person wrestler, and you're just like, well, how are they going to make this work? But he is so scary and brutal, and so calm and confident that eating of the Cheetos is like it's no big deal, and that's a characteristic. And so you're like, oh, this is brilliant. This is so interesting. And to have someone so small, so diminutive, could be an equal to this guy who's so swole, I thought was a nice thing for you to look at. And a new character to bring to, as you said, Tessa, James's ability to kind of create these characters or bring these characters from the comics onto the screen and make them unique and distinctive, giving them their own personality. Just genius stuff.
Can I ask like sort of a novice question? But like, with this butterfly story, is this part of the comics or is this something?
No, this isn't. That's what I was
okay, cool. Because I was
James
like,
just poof created this.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I really wasn't sure, and I was gonna look into it like once I got further into it, but I was like, I had no idea if this was something bound to a specific storyline or if James was just having fun. But that's cool.
It's just completely out of his brain, and out of his brain. That was a good fun there. Like I was going to say, the very end of this episode 3, we see the thing climb out, and I love how he goes, "Oh, Project Butterfly!" Like Project Starfish was a starfish. Project Butterfly is this little butterfly creature, which looks super cool, by the way.
Oh,
and when you get close-up looks of them later, like it's incredible.
It reminded me of the fairies from Pan's Labyrinth when they kind of start fluttering through, and it was just adorable. So I don't know how evil they're going to end up being, but I mean, they're adorable so far.
They're super cute. I did get a little Starro vibe from it, like, oh, this is going in and creating this, taking over a body, kind of like the Starro stuff did. But I'm excited for people to see where it goes, and I'm excited to see where it ends because we haven't gotten the final episode. I've seen the first 7, but I haven't seen the finale yet, and so I waited to search, like you said, Heather. You were wondering if it was from the comics. I waited till I watched all 7 episodes to really dive in and find out because I didn't want to accidentally spoil myself with anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to find out that this is not even based off anything in the comics. Like he just poof made it up. It just shows again, James Gunn, who thinks of this? I'm gonna have these aliens that control you from your brain. What? Yeah. It's insane to me. What did you guys think of the butterflies and the reveal of actually seeing a butterfly in the end of episode 3?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I mean, it feels very James Gunny if you think of Slither and things like that. He's big into aliens coming and doing stuff to people, and it also goes back to his trauma days and everything like that. It feels just drawn from that, but yet it feels fresh. And apparently bugs doing weird things in people's brains are having another moment because between this and Boba Fett, with the little sort of lizardy guy going in his head, giving in a weird mind trip. But this is like your classic alien, technically invasion control, and those wonderful little moments when the whole family's they bring their long tongues out and start drinking the sort of the nectar stuff and everything. It's just a great little moment, a little reveal, and you just think, oh boy, here we go, James Gunn getting into this kind of stuff again, and you love it, and it's really, really well done. And I love where, I mean, I like some of you guys, I've seen 1 through 7. I like where a lot of it goes, but I won't say anything about the future. But the reveal of it is great. The whole idea of it, the whole idea of the torture scene with the main guy, the dad and Vigilante, and he's like, I won't give him anything. He's like, well, give him something, maybe give him a little bit. And the whole he's trying to cut his pinky toe off, and Vigilante thinking, oh, if you cut my pinky toe off, I won't be able to walk. And it was like, no, that's not how that works. It'll be fine. It'll be painful, but it'll be fine. And the fact that his tools are all blunt, so that he's really not able to do it that well. And Vigilante's like, because your tools aren't worth crap. It's just, it's the whole butterfly thing, and even little extra moments like Peacemaker finding the spaceship in the apartment, and how that gets revealed as he's just finished a threesome with himself, a woman from an apartment who I should talk about in a minute, and Vigilante. And it's just James Gunn.
I mean, Amber is kind of like the dark horse candidate for stealing this series she's been great.
I don't know how much more we see of her. I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
a lot of her in these 3 episodes, but like, I'm just like, I really hope Amber's like part of the crew and geared up by episode 8. So that whole back and forth with her and the husband, like, just
my god,
because we've
She's
all
like,
been around couples like that.
oh yeah,
Yes.
But just they
yeah.
just can't, like, they just seem like they hate each other, and like he's just like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And then the threesome reveal was fantastic. I'm really. It's interesting because you mentioned sort of this alien vibe taking over, and it's interesting because, like, again, I've only seen through 3 so far. So I was just kind of feeling like, oh, we're going to be doing like these fun little missions, like, so I kind of had like the scope of X-Files in my head, where now it's like once you see the map at the end where there's like dot 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 dot, I was like, oh, we're doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers now. Okay, gotcha. This is huge. So I'm personally excited to see how that plays out, because I have zero idea where it's going. And especially because I can't really even Google it. So it's not even like I could go cheat and look up what the comic storyline was. But like, I think that's what I love about James so much, is that he's somebody who isn't afraid to wear his influences on his sleeve, but also like does it in such a thoughtful way that it never feels like obvious or he's just looking for applause or anything like that. Like, here's the thing, by making their headquarters Henenlotter Video, that is a joke for maybe 5% of that audience. But you know what? I'm part of that 5%. And I nearly jumped out of my chair and I was like, yes. Because like, I'm going to wait for Lloyd to see if Lloyd Kaufman shows up, because Lloyd shows up in everything. But like, to go and reference Henenlotter, like nobody, most people don't know the basket case guy. But us weird geeky people like who love horror, like we're like, that's for us. And I love that it's all over the place. It's not simply just for comic fans. And I think that's what I think he does so well with Suicide Squad, was like, I think it was a movie you could come into, and if you're a comic book fan, you could find the comic booky stuff to really, really love. But if you're somebody who comes from like the horror side or things like that, like you see that it really is like a really big budgeted trauma movie with a lot of heart. And like James just kind of defies genre, I think, at this point. I think James has created his own genre. And I want more and more people to give him all the sandboxes he wants to play in. So, but yeah, I just think it's, there's nobody doing what he's doing right now, which is pretty interesting.
I don't think a lot of people can. And I think that's why he stands out so well, because like I said, walking that line between both those things is not easy to do, between making fun of something without losing the stakes. And certainly even with the butterfly thing, he's like, you guys now what is it? Operation Butterfly. Are we going after a big butterfly? Because you guys aren't really inventive with your file names about this kind of stuff. And sure enough, he's like, it's a butterfly. He's like, what? It really is. Am I going after a big butterfly? So
I did like that they think he was going to fight Mothra, though.
Yeah, Mothra. Yeah, I want to fight Mothra.
That was cool.
So
I was like, you don't want to fight Mothra. You just want to like love Mothra. Like she's a good one.
So good. So good.
Oh, he's so great at everything he does. And I think that's something that has come across in his films, but to watch a series playing out, and especially as it continues on, to see that he's not like losing things along the way. You're gaining stuff and stuff pays off. Little bits and pieces from previous episodes all start to really pay off, which is something he does really well. And with an 8 episode, arc here, we've only seen 7, but with 8 of them, and like you guys said before, they're like 38 to like 49 minutes long. I mean, that's a lot of time. Yeah. And to do the character development and the story development so well, and again, have us start to like I don't want to like Peacemaker. I don't. Anybody's crying over killing Rick Flag, and you're like, oh, he feels bad. I'm mad at him for this thing, and he's crying about it. How can I hate him?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though, and what I like about this, and it's something that a lot of us will tune into, but I think some people it's going to go over their head. But I think by doing something like Suicide Squad and doing something like Peacemaker, like James Gunn, like as much as he's having fun with the conventions of comics and that genre specifically, like he's asking all of us to take a moment and like look at the ugliness that we all have. Like we want to all say that we're perfect and things like that, but none of us are. We all have our flaws. And so I think it's really interesting that like by taking this character who on paper is a terrible person, he's killed off a beloved character, he's got all of these really bad, sort of habits and beliefs because of the way that he was raised and the work that he's done. Like, I think it's us having to confront things within ourselves too. But he does it in a way that's just really smart, and it doesn't feel like it's poking its finger at you, where it's like, it's okay to change. It's okay to adapt to where everything is moving. Like, and it's scary, but you're going to be okay. And I think ultimately, like you mentioned, like how we're Peacemaker in a lot of this, where we're trying to figure out how everything's going to play out. Like, I think that also kind of ties into like sort of a cycle, like a psychological, sociological kind of way, where, like, you know, at the end of the day, we have to sit there and ask ourselves, like, we want to pretend like that we're all high and mighty, but like, who are we really? You know? And I just think that's, like, again, it's one of these things where you never feel like those lessons come at the expense of the entertainment and the fun factor of the series. But ultimately, like, James very much is doing a confrontation of social issues here, just in a really clever, funny, naughty, nasty way. And I love that. Like, I think we need more of that. Like, I kind of wish sometimes, you know, more people weren't afraid to confront things. And I think Suicide Squad does the same thing too. But I think this is a little more nuanced because he gets more time to play around with it.
Right.
Yeah, yep, you're exactly right. And there's even some, like, they've touched a little bit on like the racism stuff, obviously, with his dad and stuff, but we get a little more into it too as we go on. And it's just so good. It's so good. There's so much to talk about. But before we wrap up this first episode, I'd love if anybody wants to talk about like any of their favorite moments. I know we've talked a lot about a lot of incredible moments. For me, one of my favorite moments, just because I love gross, grotesque stuff, is literally the end of episode 3 where you see the butterfly like crawl out of the crushed open head, and you're, ugh, I love that stuff. But does anybody else have any favorite moments they want to talk about?
James, you got something?
I've said previously about my just deep and abiding love for Eagley, and honestly, even just little subtle moments that you might not otherwise notice when they're at the table with him and his dad, and Eagley's just there between them. He's like literally looking between them, and then stabbing, like eating some food, and then sort of looking between them, and then and everything that Eagle does. From, you know, when Adebayo sort of comes and goes, is he friendly, and tries to pet him, and Eagley bites. He goes, well, he's friendly to me, and it's just fantastic. He's everything I could hope from like a CGI sidekick, and he never seems like CGI. I mean, quite honestly, everything that Eagle does is just pure gold. He's just a perfect sort of little character. I love how he'll just go off at a moment, and then at the end of I think, what is it, episode 1, Eagle will just fly off, and then he'll just bring like a dead possum as if to say, like, here, I brought you this to help, and it's like, thanks. But you know, he's fantastic. I think every moment with Eagle, even the opening musical number, even the opening credits, where Eagle squawks, and it's just like, I want to be a part of this. I'm clearly a big part of this, so let me be. I love it. I think that's a genius creation. I really do.
Yeah, they do a great job of keeping his eye line right with the CG. Like, it's because I'm always looking for that when if the eye line is off from the CG, and they do a great job with it, which adds to the reality of what you're watching, right? Because you can't pick it apart. So it's a great point. I think for me, it has to be when he falls apart on the bed and cries and remembers what he did to Rick Flag. I mean, you can have the greatest superhero film or greatest superhero show, but if you don't care about the superhero, the main character, it's not going to matter. You could have all the references, all the good actors around, but if you don't care about the character, it's not going to work. That moment was the moment where I dialed in going, okay, they're going to break some norms in the approach to superhero television shows that we haven't seen. Even with all these great Marvel shows, we haven't seen something quite like this. Loki maybe a little bit came close, the self-referential stuff, self-hate stuff, but this is deep. I mean, this is deep inside of him, and brilliant by James Gunn to end it with that, as I mentioned earlier, the crotch stuff. Brilliant to have like this really deep emotional moment where you feel for him, and he's literally slapping himself, saying, no one loves you. You're hated by everybody. Who hasn't? I mean, I think there's a lot of people in this world who have felt this way at some point or feel this way constantly, and he represents that. So it's so genius to have a character who has that so that people can connect to it. So I think there's a universality to that I think is so smart of James Gunn and the creators to put into this character. And I felt so much for him in that moment. And then boom, have you followed up with that crotch stuff so you maintain the humor. As Heather said earlier, they maintain the humor even though they go deeper into the sadder parts of Peacemaker's existence. So yeah, that was my favorite scene of the first 3 episodes for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have all touched on things that I absolutely loved. I will say face pizza.
Yes!
That's
right.
Because you're like you think that there's a piece of pizza amongst this giant Sonic crater in a parking lot. You think I know there's a possum laying there. Maybe the possum brought the pizza, but probably not. So that was just like a fun little moment that really kind of adds a little bit of pitch black humor to it. But yeah, I think, for me, like, honestly, like, I think it is the quieter moments. It's like, them eating at the restaurant, just kind of settling in. I love the big moments. I love the fights and the moments of tension where you're like, he's getting ready to shoot and is he going to do it and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, like, I'm driven by characters. And so I'm just hooked on these characters, and I'm hooked on all of them. And especially Eagley. Like, I want Eagley to have his own show. And I think when you mentioned like how he comes in at the opening credits, like, he is front and center. Like, if in his mind, this is the Eagley show. So, and I think that's just, again, it's just these little things, these little touches. Like, I just want to like beat up James. You're like, how are you so damn smart? How are you so good at this? But it takes a lot of practice, because I can remember, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Lolly Love, which is a movie he did early 2000s, back when he was still married to Jenna Fisher. And that was like my introduction to him. I saw that before any of his trauma stuff. And even in there, like, it's always character. And I just, like, again, like I said, give him every sandbox that he wants. I want to go see all of them. And, as somebody who hasn't watched ahead yet, I'm really, really stoked to see where this goes, because I have no idea. I'm on the ride too, so
I'm excited for you to experience that.
Yeah.
I said I'm jealous of everyone who's watching it for the first time ever. Like, to be able to really experience it all. But I will say it holds up in rewatches, and it even like John kind of touched on before, if you watch it again, you get a new appreciation for certain moments and certain things that happen.
Can't wait.
I know. And we didn't talk too much about Myrn, but I dig him. Later on, definitely gets a lot more interesting and a lot more interesting. But I like him. He's good. I felt like he was a little underused at the beginning, or just like that's him being like quiet and, not as into it as everybody else, kind of bossing them around, but not being a part of it all. But I don't know. For me, standouts got to be like, Harcourt was a bit, everyone has their standout moments as a thing too. Like, but I really, really love Harcourt in this series. Big fan. I think she's so good. Like, that scene at the bar is just one of my favorite scenes. Speaking of favorite scenes, I love when she's just like, I just want to finish this beer. Why can't I drink this beer? Like, you guys gonna mess this all up for me.
I think she spoke for every woman when that moment happened. I just want to have a beer at a bar without any idiots coming up to me and trying to talk to
because
me.
I put on makeup, now I can't.
Yes,
and that's basically where it's at with her, which is really interesting.
I feel it. Well, also how Peacemaker is just like thinks she's just gonna sleep with him. Like, he's just like, okay, well, I've been in jail for a while, so I need this. And like, she's just gonna be like, okay, like, what do you, it's again goes back to that, like, where do you get this stuff from? But then you see his dad, and you're like, oh, well, that's probably part of your problem. Before we wrap up, I know this is super hard, and I even played around with it in my head. But if you guys could rank these episodes, I know it's very hard because they're all very good. But how would you?
I would probably go 3-1-2.
That's me. I'm with you, Heather.
Because like one is always like you're setting things up, and so there's usually an awkwardness. But I will say I like the fact that this didn't really have that sort of first episode awkwardness to it. Like, I think it really just, like, you could literally turn off Suicide Squad and go right into this, and it just the continuity is perfect. And I think it just really does a great job of like taking that character and putting him off kilter. In a lot of ways. And 2, I feel like is sort of like the meat, where it's like it's building up to things that we're seeing then ultimately in episode 3. And then 3, I think, kind of blows the doors wide open. And I don't mean it like, in terms of quality, because they're all great. But yeah, I think for me right now, I'm at 3-1-2.
Yeah. That's how I am too.
I'll let James go first.
I think I would have to say I think I would put it at 1-3-2 for me, just in terms of I really like that first episode. I mean, Eagley hug and everything like that, and everything else that goes along with it. The real feeling of it's a pilot for this show, but it's not a pilot. It's absolutely just introducing the world without you feeling like you're being force fed everything you're going to need to know, and there's still stuff to come. So absolutely, I really do like that first episode, but. Yeah, it's very tough to split between them because honestly, the quality level is so high.
Yeah.
I think I'm in James's camp. I think it's 1-3-2 because it's not your standard pilot episode, which is like just get through it so you can get to everything else. There's so much to enjoy here. I mean, him picking up the choir boy. I mean, what a joke made at the expense of hair metal bands, the choir boys. I mean, just genius stuff like that throughout the episode. Plus, you get the hardcore sex scenes, so you're like, this is the show. This is the show. You're either in or you're out. This is the show. And then the brutal fight sequence and everything's introduced here, and him using the helmet, all of that just works so well. And then the disdain everyone seems to have for him is all there. So you're immediately kind of connecting with this guy, because I remember walking out of the Suicide Squad in the theater and going, I don't want to see a series about this guy. He's a jerk off. And then right after the first episode, you're like, I can't wait to watch the rest of this series. So that's why I think 1-3-2 works for me in the listing along with James.
Totally get that. Yeah, I've had a lot of people actually ask me, like, whoa, I hated him in the Suicide Squad. Why is he even having a series? And I'm like, I promise you're going to end up reluctantly really liking him. Yeah. And especially as the season goes on, there's just so much in here, and we can't wait to join you guys for after shows throughout the entire season, hopefully because I want more. Let's make a second season of Peacemaker, guys. But before we wrap up, I'm Tessa Smith. You guys can find me everywhere at Mama's Geeky, mamasgeeky.com, Mama's Geeky on all social media. John, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
You can always find me at The Roca Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok now. That's right. The old man's on TikTok. And you can follow and subscribe to me at Twitch, The Outlaw Nation, and my outlet, The Outlaw Nation, youtube.com/John Roca Says. See all the stuff we got going on, plus my podcast, The Geek Buddies, The Top 10, and The Cinephiles.
How about you, James?
I can be found at Jam White on Twitter, at Jammer White on Instagram, and then I am a regular news writer for EmpireOnline.com, which is the website of Empire Magazine. I also write my Substack, Jay Writes, which is usually a sort of a weekend watch type review column, but also some pop culture type columns as I feel like writing them, as I have the time. And that's mostly where you can find me. And please just hit me up on Twitter if you want to ask me anything, or if you want to talk to me about stuff, because I always enjoy that kind of stuff.
And why don't you close us out, Heather?
All right. And I am Heather Wixson. I'm over at The Horror Chick. You can find my work over at dailydead.com, as well as over at fangoria.com. And I won't plug the book again, but there's a book out there. You can Google it. I was on a show yesterday. They were like trying to get me to plug the book, and I missed where it was going, and I started plugging somebody else's book. So I feel like I should just end with Clark Collis did a really fantastic book about Shaun of the Dead called "You've Got Red on You," and it's amazing and brilliant, and it's one of my favorite things I read. So I'll close it with a plug for Clark. It fits my theme this week.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, Peacemaker dropped the first 3 episodes, as you guys know, with 1 episode to follow, all the way up until the finale on February 17th, which I'm dying to see. It's all on HBO Max. The Suicide Squad, if you need to catch up, is also available on HBO Max, so be sure to check that out. And we will see you guys next week.